So if you've been doing this music thing for any length of time and you have paying clients or have ever had paying clients, it's for sure you've run into some issues, some disagreements, parting of ways. You fired a client fired you. And so today in this video, what I'd like to talk about is how to deal with difficult clients. When things go sideways, what's the best way to handle it? Thank you guys for stopping by for another video. If you're new here, I'm Cole Caparoon. I'm a producer and a mix engineer and an Atmos mixer, session guitar player in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm in my 21st year, nearly my 22nd year of making records. Happy New Year, by the way. Hope you guys all had a wonderful Christmas. Okay, so I want to start with kind of the most hotly debated things and how you should handle this. The first one is, do you give them their music when it goes sideways? Regardless of if you get to the end of the project, regardless if you're halfway through or maybe you've barely even started, do you give them the session? Now, for me, this answer used to be no back in the day because I'm like, that's my proprietary stuff. That's my engineering. That's my producing. It's my work. But once you get into this for any length of time, it's like, who cares? I don't care. Have I been paid? That's the biggest thing. If I have been paid for the work that I've done, then they are welcome to have everything that we've done so far. Again, as long as they don't owe me any money. So that's a big one that gets debated. Just give them the session. In my opinion, it's the most professional way to handle it. It's the way that involves the least amount of controversy. If you part ways, just give them your session. Now, if they have not paid you, this is where things get a little sticky because then it kind of becomes up to you. Do you just want to separate and just be done with the whole thing, even if they owe you money? That is totally your call. Personally, I charge 100% up front on everything that I do, partially just to avoid this situation. So if I'm working on a piece of music in any capacity, I've already been paid for that. And I've done other videos talking about how I charge, my charging structure, and how I do all that. But in a nutshell, for mixing and mastering and Atmos mixes, I charge 100% up front, and that payment gets you in line in the calendar. So you're not even on the calendar, in the queue, until you've paid in full. Now, it was a lot of years before I could pull this off and actually make this work. When I'm producing, I take a retainer fee, and that retainer holds your place in line. And then once we start, we work through that retainer money. And then once we've worked through all of that money, then I take another payment. And so in doing it this way, I'm always paid. I'm never working on anything without getting paid, which is part of the reason why I'm like, yeah, take your session. Now, I think the next thing is who gets the final say in the creative aspect of the project. Because if you're being hired as the producer, and there's a very clear distinction between being hired to engineer and record and being hired to produce. When you're being hired to engineer, you are just there to hit record and place microphones. That's it. When you're being hired to produce, you are there for your creative tastes and often also to set up microphones. So I think this is a really important thing to establish before the project even starts. Are you just the engineer, or are you the producer? And the artist, the client, should know the difference between the two and know what that means. That said, in my opinion, it is a collaborative effort. I am there to shine the most marketable light that I can on the artist's music. But it is their music, and it is their money, and it is their project. They have to love what's going on. And so way back in the day, I used to get defensive in certain situations when an artist was wanting to do stuff that just was dumb, was really just not good. Sometimes this crossed over into like objectively not good, not just a creative decision that we disagreed on, but objectively not good. There were times back in the day when I used to butt heads with artists pretty hard over stuff like that. And nowadays, it's their art. They have the final say on everything, and I'm just there to facilitate it and hopefully nudge it in a direction that makes it of higher quality, that makes it of higher marketability, but it's their art. So if there's a situation in which I think that we're headed the wrong way, then it's my job to come up with an idea that's obviously better. that the client likes better in order to get them to abandon the thing that I don't really love. So that's the best way to look at this, in my opinion, is how do I present an idea or present a direction that is so much undeniably better than what they had in mind that they're like, yep, absolutely, let's do that. And if I can't do that, then whatever they want is what we're going with. There is no point in fighting with a client. And that's the other thing that I have learned, is that if you let things escalate into an actual argument, as soon as you are in an actual argument with your client, your relationship is over. They will likely never use you again. And this is what we'd like to avoid. Now, if things go sideways enough where you part ways with them, this is where it can get sticky. I've already said just give them their session, but what I think is important is to maintain, first of all, never get mad, never yell, never call names, be professional at all times. Sometimes this can get difficult, but be professional at all times. So if you've done everything that you can and it's just not vibing, because sometimes we just don't collaborate well, and that's perfectly fine. It's okay to not resonate with somebody creatively. That's totally fine. So that's the first thing that I would like to say here is you should definitely take a look at yourself and see if there was things that you could have done to avoid this, to see if there was a way for you to musically get them to the finish line. You should definitely look at yourself and figure out if there was ways that you could have improved. However, and this is kind of an oxymoron, I would also just don't take it personally. One, artistic people, creative people can be very wishy-washy. A lot of us are, even as creative producers, a lot of us are very interesting people. But actual artists who are trying to make a living off of their music, a lot of times they're kind of even more unique and interesting individuals. And that's one of the things that is wonderful about them. It's one of the things that allows them to create art that may be successful. I guess my point is, like, look at yourself, see what you could have done better, but also don't take it so personally. I know the first handful of times a project went sideways, I was absolutely devastated. The first time someone left in the middle of the project and we didn't even finish the song, I was absolutely devastated. We can approach this from a much more healthy point of view, where be self-analytical, figure out what you could have done better, but then also let it go, because it may have had nothing to do with you. Now, once a project has officially gone sideways and the artist has made the request to go somewhere else, or they have notified you. So, I mean, sometimes they just ghost you. So sometimes they just stop responding to all calls or texts. Another reason why I like to charge up front. But if they've notified you they're going somewhere else, if they've notified you that they would like their session, this is immediately where I stop helping. I no longer offer my opinion about anything career related, anything musical related, anything business related, logistics related. This is where you are no longer my client. And so for me personally, you handle it however you'd like to, but for me personally, this is the end of our professional relationship. And I'm happy to send your sessions, and I'm happy to send you all your stuff. You want to come over with a hard drive and transfer everything, like, I'm happy to facilitate it, but you are no longer getting help from me, and you're no longer getting creative input from me whatsoever. And not in a malicious way, just as in you're no longer my client. There has been a handful of times, where a client has went somewhere else and then still was relying on me for music industry advice, or how to release their music, or business advice, and I'm like, yeah, that's not how this works. Like, I will pour everything I have into you when you're my client. You get 100% of me when you're my client. But when you're not my client, then you're just like everybody else. Follow the YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram. I'm always posting stuff, and you'll probably learn a lot there, but I'm no longer giving detailed personal advice once you have decided to go somewhere else. Now, the very best way to avoid this altogether is huge amounts of communication up front. Not so much that it overwhelms the artist, so they're like, oh, hiring this guy seems like it's more trouble than it's worth, but like super crystal clear communication. So that way, The client knows exactly what they're going to get from you. When they hire me, they know exactly what they're getting. They are getting the mix and the master, or we're getting a full production, and the mix and the master, or we're getting just the Atmos mix, or we're getting the stereo mix and the Atmos mix. Like, whatever it is, they know exactly what they're getting into. And also prices. I'm a flat rate for mixing. I'm a flat rate for mastering. I'm a flat rate for Atmos mixes. And I'm a ballpark rate per song for full productions. And I tell them this ballpark. It's plus or minus $200 or $300 from this exact mark. And you can expect the song to land in this ballpark. And if it's, you know, it may be on the high end, it may be on the low end. It depends on how much time we spend editing, how many takes it takes you to get your vocals right, how many session players we hire, how many changes we make to the production, etc., etc. But I try to be very, very clear about communication. And over the years, as things have gone sideways, I have made note of those and figured out how I could have communicated better, so that way, the way that it went sideways can never happen again. And so I think that's just one of these things that it's been a lot of years. I'm over 2 decades into this, and I feel like finally, in the past year or two, I've got a handle on how to communicate in a way that our expectations are the same. And if something goes sideways, it's purely for creative differences, and that's okay, because I cannot do absolutely everything. And I think it's also important to understand that sometimes artists will say one thing and mean a completely different thing. And I think that it's up to us, it's our job to figure out what they actually mean, not necessarily what they're saying sometimes. Now, there's a few good examples of this. One, if a client wants me to just do my thing, which I get a lot these days. Just people usually hire me because they've heard stuff that I've done, and they want me to just do me on their song. And I love this. This is amazing. But sometimes clients say that and they don't actually mean it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's my job to read between the lines and pick up on the signs. Do they really want me to just do me? Or do they just like what I do, but they have some very specific things in mind that they would like to have happen? And either way, it's totally fine. But it's our job to understand that and to identify that as producers and mixers. Before I go on, there are links in the description down below to every piece of gear that I use, and those links do go to Sweetwater. So thank you, Sweetwater, for sponsoring this video. Anytime you guys need any piece of musical gear whatsoever, you can jump on any one of my videos, click on any one of the links in the description below, and once you're on the site, you can purchase anything that you need, and it costs you nothing extra. But when you do that, every time you do that, it goes just a little ways to help support this channel and help me keep making content just like this. So thank you guys for using those links anytime you need to purchase anything, and thank you, Sweetwater, for sponsoring this video. I could probably keep going on and on and on about this topic and get more and more and more nuanced, but I feel like this was probably a pretty good overview. The main thing, just to recap, be professional. Always work for the client. Understand that it's their music, it's their art, and their money. And so we are here to serve them and do the best we can for them. And then when things go sideways, just let it be a clean break. Don't be hostile. Don't be aggressive. Just let it happen. Look at yourself and figure out if there was a way that you could have avoided it via communication or musical skills or whatever. Is there any way you could have avoided this? Work to avoid it on all future projects. And then if there was no way to avoid it, don't take it personally. Don't internalize it and let it ruin your day, because it's ruined many days of mine over the years. So thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.